It's all about the rhetoric, yo. So, anyways, this is for AP Lang kids, and we're going to talk about our rhetorical analysis that we began our last class. Hopefully, you guys are working on it. Two biggest things you need is you need to know the soapstone information. A lot of that's laid out in the Follow the Columnist assignment, which, by the way, is due. The first three are due at the end of this week. So make sure that you're working on that Follow the Columnist activity. That the first three is due Thursday or Friday, depending on if you're an A-day or a B-day group. But that lays out the soapstone, so you've got your subject, your occasion, your audience, your purpose, and then, of course, your tone. It's something that you can really look up on the internet and find very easily and kind of get lots of great examples. And hopefully, you've been working on it through that assignment that I just mentioned, a minute ago. The other part is you're going to want your rhetorical handbook, and that really has everything in there. And remember that rhetoric isn't just some of the devices that we've talked about and had quizzes about thus far in the year, whether it's aphorisms, whether it's the use of metaphors and things like that. But it's also in the syntax and the way that the writer puts together their argument. So I'm going to talk about that here in a hot minute. So our rhetorical analysis that we're working on, you guys are doing in groups of 4, deals with the 2 Coca-Cola letters, right? So you've got the Coca-Cola executive, who's basically like sort of throwing out a cease and desist on the use of "it's the real thing," and then you've got the rebuttal from the Grove Press editor. So it's 2 entirely different tones, so you should definitely talk about that. There is definitely much more of a formal tone to the Coca-Cola executive, and there's definitely more of a satirical tone coming from the Grove Press editor. And that's a big part of it, because remember I said getting into the whole soapstone thing, you have to consider who is writing the argument, right, and what their purpose is. One guy is basically approaching that, it could be confusing for the customers. Also, you're kind of infringing upon our trademark, even though when you take a look at the Grove Press thing, he kind of indicates that, hey, this is not a trademark phrase. So they basically lay out their arguments, and while the Coca-Cola executive comes off dry, and you almost think that there might not be any rhetorical devices, remember what I said when you take a look at syntax, right? The fact that there's periodic listing that he uses in order to validate his claim. Well, that's 3 rhetorical devices right there in one sentence. You want to take a look at the logical fallacies, and there's a circular argument where basically he just keeps coming back to the same point again and again. And that's, hey, we had it first, and because we had it first, it's ours, don't use it. He does throw out sort of a little bit of pathos in the Coca-Cola letter where he's like, oh, it could be so confusing for the customer. Like, what if they go in trying to get a book, but they wind up with a 6-pack of Coke? Or what if they go in for a 6-pack of Coca-Cola, but they wind up getting a book? Like, we don't want them to be confused. Most of the rest of it, really, he's looking at it from an ethical and a legal standpoint or a logical standpoint. So there's a lot of ethos and logos through that whole letter. When you flip to the Grove Press side, obviously, you get a lot of satire. Obviously, there's an ad hominem kind of approach in terms of logical fallacy, where he's sort of addressing his whole letter. Really, this is the Grove Press guy. The whole letter from him isn't really talking about the slogan a lot of times, or even the customer. He's sort of addressing the Coca-Cola executive specifically. It kind of makes it more personal. Clearly, there's a lot more pathos in his as well. And there's just a whole litany of rhetorical devices that's used that obviously seem a lot more obtainable for you in your analysis, because they're kind of more eye-catching and humorous. So think about those kind of things when you get into it. But really, you can go through each part of that rhetorical handbook and sort of break it down. The last bit of that, and here's the thing, really unpacking the prompts. This is a released 1998 rhetorical analysis prompt, is making sure that you answer all parts. And so, sort of the first part of that is to look at the rhetorical devices in both letters, and then the second part of that is who was more effective or who was more persuasive, and then you have to be prepared to defend it. You have to say why either the Coke or the Grove Press guy was more effective in his use of those rhetorical devices, or what about their argument in general makes it a stronger argument. So that's where we're at. We're going to continue to really break this down. A lot of release prompts. We'll probably build in some more satire and stuff like that through the unit, just because it's a good spot to do it. And satire can certainly be a great form of persuasion and rhetoric as well. So that's what we're going to continue to do. The only other thing that I want to throw out to you guys is that we really need to get our hands on a copy of The Short and Tragic Life of Robert Peace. And I mean, we talk about irony. Obviously, there's a lot of irony in the title when, there's the gentleman's name is Robert Peace, but we're talking about a short and tragic life. Of course, outside of that, it's a pretty hard-hitting book. It's obviously nonfiction as we are continuing to make our way through A.P. Lang. And it's a true life account of a gentleman from Trenton, New Jersey, who makes his way to the Ivy Leagues. And I don't want to give away too much. But it really does tie into a lot of the things that we've read throughout the year. And that's completely intentional because as we move forward, we're going to start to synthesize the books that we've used in class, some of the short articles and prompts and things of our discussion, whether they're Socratic in nature or not, in order to build towards synthesis. And there will hopefully be some familiarity amongst all the things that we use. That's clearly intentional. But the other purpose that all this serves is this is a lot of ammunition for when you go and you take the actual AP exam. I'm using a lot of real life concrete things and individuals and events that you can cite so you have a great frame of reference. So that's where we're at, guys. Hit me up. As always, I'm in early in the morning, and I look forward to seeing what you guys do as a group on this rhetorical analysis. You can guess that Time Right is coming up shortly here because basically we're going to do a couple of smaller things in class. We'll probably do something from the Norton sampler, and then we'll probably get into the book here in the next day or two, and then of course you can see a Time Right coming early next week. So that's what it is, guys. Get down on that rhetorical analysis. Enjoy and have a great start to your week. Later.